So the first project I want to share is some work that I've done with sounded methodologies. So when I was doing my dissertation research, which explored how college students navigate the socio-historical context of race on campus, I had done all this data generation, right? I'd done focus groups, I had students creating maps to describe their relationship to place, I'd gone on walking interviews with students, and when I got to the point where I was trying to make meaning of all of this data, I had all these transcripts laid out in front of me. And I was grounded in critical materialist and critical spatial theories, and these transcripts were just really flat, right? Like the complexity of the stories that students were sharing weren't coming through in the flatness of the transcripts. And so I turned to sound and started creating these compilations of student voices. Ultimately, I created a kind of 6-minute compilation of student stories of navigating campus history. And I started to ask these questions. So in the paper that I wrote from it, I started to ask these questions about how audio might offer methodological possibilities for thinking about our complicated and entangled histories, how audio might offer these representational possibilities of layering, nonlinearity, kind of the complicatedness of our experience at the same time as there is the specificity and situatedness, right, that comes from listening to someone speak. And lastly, the last thing there was this idea of critical vigilance, which comes from bell hooks, or how listening to something might offer you a kind of connection or empathy that you might get differently than reading something on the page. This research kind of found its way into a second inquiry, which looked at more than human sounds. Specifically, as I was doing these walking interviews with students, something that kept coming up in our engagements was the sound of a leaf blower. Happening on campus space. And specifically, there was this one moment with a student where we were walking and the sound of the leaf blower was so loud that we had to stop talking, right, and wait for them to pass. And after that passed, the student turned to me and said, "They even have to manage the leaves on campus." And this made me really start thinking about how listening to more than human sounds might offer us a different critical entry point for analysis, different questions about place and our engagements with place. Specifically in the paper I ended up writing from it, I thought about these more than human sounds, specifically the sound of the leaf blower, and I map how this entangles with lawn management practices and their connections to white supremacy and colonialism, and how those continue to be maintained on college campuses. Again, this question of indexicality of sound or place, or this idea of how when you listen to a particular sound, it might bring you back to a place or a particular memory. And then lastly, this question of how we listen. This is an offering that I have in this paper, that how we listen or what we attune to shapes how we might imagine how we are otherwise in spaces. So this work, which largely came from my dissertation research, has led to the work that I've started to do now as I found myself 4 years in on a tenure track faculty line, which is an interest in collective and collaborative and speculative methodologies. So this work overarchingly asks how we seek modes of inquiring, how the ways in which we might do research might offer, well, in teaching and being and becoming in the academy, might offer us ways of knowing that are affirmative and anti-oppressive. Ways that we might imagine ourselves otherwise within the academy, within research. And so some of this work, this paper was actually done with several students within the MFE COE that took a 8410 class with me, our design and qualitative research class. We engaged in a collaborative biography where we inquired about what it was like to be a woman in academia during the COVID-19 pandemic. This paper is also with a group of 6 Black women who took a theories and qualitative design class with me. In the paper, the students write letters to theory to inquire about their relationship to theory. And then this paper with my colleagues, Laura Smithers and Paul Eaton, together we inquire about our relationship with post-qualitative inquiry and how that matters in the ways in which we teach and kind of be in the academy. So overarchingly, I'm a methodologist, which means that I'm interested in how the questions that we know matter, or the questions that we ask matter for how we know in the world, how we are in the world. And I'll end with this quote from Rosie Braidotti, who's a critical posthuman scholar, who writes, "I'm seeking modes of representation and forms of accountability that are adequate to the real life complexities, the real life world I am living in." Thank you.